Welcome, everyone. It's Trey Jadlow. I'm here on this third day of April 2021. I'm here with my new friend Sean, whom I just met today, I think, on the MeWe group for Atheist and Christian Debate. And I asked if he would be willing to come on and discuss the concept of the existence of God. And he has been very gracious to agree to come on. And he is a man from down under, I find out. What part of Australia are you from, Sean?
I live in a small town in northeast Victoria, and I'm a high school teacher. I teach physics and science. I've got a master's degree in experimental physics, and I was a research scientist and published a couple of papers before I took up teaching.
Okay. And would you consider yourself atheist or agnostic, or what would you, how would you like this?
Well, I don't know there's a God, so I would consider myself agnostic, but
Okay.
I don't actually believe there's a God, which would make me an atheist.
I'm sorry, the last thing you said was you
I
don't
don't
believe.
actually believe in a God, so that would make me an atheist.
Okay, but you're, I mean, you would be a classical atheist. I mean, you're not a hard atheist. Not hardly any of those exist where they actually say that they know God doesn't exist. It's pretty hard to prove a negative. Um, but yeah, so okay. Well, would you mind telling me a little bit about yourself? I'd like to tell you about myself as well, but if you give me an idea of maybe if you were you raised in a secular home or did you have a Christian upbringing? You
I,
mind
I
telling
was
me about
raised in
that?
a I was raised in a secular home. I went to an Anglican boys' school for my education, so I learned about Anglicanism,
Okay.
and I've worked in Catholic schools, so I know quite a bit about Catholicism.
Okay. Well, great. That's very nice. Okay. So I am I'm a born again Christian. I've been a Christian about 33 years, I think, and 34 years, and um, I'm 54 years old. I live in Kansas, the state of Kansas in the United States, right smack dab in the middle of the country. And I'm a dental lab technician by trade, so I make crown and bridge work, like teeth, if you will, for dentists, fix prosthetics. Um, and I have sadly I'm divorced. I've got six kids though, ages 31 down to 18, three boys and three girls. And I love thinking about things. I don't have a lot of education. I'm kind of an autodidact. I like to just find things that interest me and delve into it. If something interests me, I'll dig into it. If something doesn't, I'm either white hot excited about something or stone cold bored. I'm not one of those guys that kind of floats at kind of extreme the things that interest me. And one of the things that interests me is the concept of metaphysics or the why of things. And so that leads me to inquire about things such as metaphysics and epistemology. And I like philosophy, although I'm not trained in any way. I'm just, like I said, a hack, self-taught, that kind of guy for the most part. Um, but the question that we have today is the question of God's existence. And so my question to you is, since you're a practical atheist, how do you justify your dependent existence existing independently?
Well, I'm basically an animal, and I'm made of atoms, and the atoms are arranged in a very complex way, which makes my body work and makes my brain work. Um, so laws like conservation of energy and that means that the atoms won't disappear anytime soon or anything like that. But basically, I accept naturalism. So um, the observed world that can be um, found by science is all that exists.
Okay, so you're a materialist.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that you would consider yourself um, do you know what logical positivism is?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay, basically that the positivists, and there also might be called advocate of scientism, that says that that which is empirical is the only thing that which is true. Would you hold that view?
Well, there's other things that are true, like ethical statements can be true as well, but they're a much more complex thing. But in terms of what exists, the universe has hundreds of billions of galaxies. Each galaxy has something like 100 billion stars in it. It's immense, and there's no sign of a god in it.
Okay, well, this is my question to you: is how is the universe changing? Let's put it that way.
It's expanding,
Okay.
and there's very good scientific evidence that it originated 13.7 billion years ago, an event referred to as the Big Bang. What was before that, if there was a before, is not known. But I think the idea of a god which is human-like is anthropomorphic. So the idea of a god that actually can think, can plan, and can have relationships with people, I think that's something that people have just made up. I don't think that there's really such a thing.
Okay, so you would say that the universe, well, I didn't start. Usually, when I start my conversations like this, I always ask if I can have two foundational premises that will give us a foundation by which we can have rational inquiry and make a progressive trek toward reality or truth. So, would you grant to me that that whatever we discuss, whatever we think about as we're inquiring in this world, that it must be logically coherent? In other words, we've got to rely upon the law of non-contradiction in all of our inquiry, because if we don't, then all we have is nonsense. Would you agree with that?
Well, logic and mathematics are true, and but what I'm saying is that if we are to say that something exists, then we need to have some kind of empirical statement which shows that it exists. So I believe particles called neutrinos exist. They are extremely hard to detect, but if neutrinos didn't exist, then in the process of beta decay, where a neutron turns into a proton, the laws of conservation of energy and momentum would be violated unless neutrinos existed. And not only that, it is possible to deliberately make neutrinos, and they can actually be detected, though it's difficult to do that. So I believe neutrinos exist.
Okay, but you understand that the scientific method is based up of induction and deduction. You seem to have the induction down part quite well, but you don't seem to realize that you just deduced employing the laws of logic in order to categorize those things, in order to make coherent statements about them. So you got the law of identity, the law of the excluded middle, and the law of non-contradiction. Those are the three that Aristotle posited. And those must govern our inductive categorization. In other words, some people said that the discipline of science is simply the discipline of taxonomy or categorizing. We take things and we observe them, and then we organize them into a whole in order to make sense out of reality. So if we're going to have any hope of making any sense of anything, we've got to say that the universe and that which we're talking about must be rationally coherent. I just can't say blue door stops, Jim saw Saturday. You'll think, well, what is that? Well, it's an incoherent statement. We've got to hold to the law of non-contradiction. Are you familiar with the law of non-contradiction?
Yeah, the laws of logic have to hold true, and certain physical theories, Einstein's theory of special and general relativity, to every measurement that's been made, they are true. And accurate descriptions of reality, and GPS wouldn't work if they weren't true. And
GPS wouldn't work what?
If Einstein's theory of relativity wasn't true.
Wasn't true.
Yeah, because GPS works by having a whole bunch of satellites sending out time signals, and your GPS detector detects the signals from the satellites and gets a time for each satellite, so it can get the distance to each satellite and build up a three-dimensional coordinate for where you are. And because satellites are at less gravity than on Earth, and because they're moving so fast, time is slightly shifted for them, according to Einstein's theory of relativity. And if we didn't allow for this shift, then GPS wouldn't work. It wouldn't be accurate.
Okay. I'm not sure that has to do with this conversation, but that's great. So, but you agree, though, that you've got to rely on all the variables that you're talking about, all the instances in there. They must be coherent. You've got to. Are you familiar with the principle of explosion?
Well, science has to be coherent.
Right.
You can't have one bit of science completely contradicting
That's
another bit
exactly
of
right.
science. It has to have internal coherence,
That's right.
and a new scientific theory must have some kind of test which would make it falsifiable.
That's right. And that's going to be a coherent. You're making something a coherent statement that cannot be incoherent. I mean, that's basically we've got to say we've got that. Whenever we're having an inquiry, we've always got to rely on the law of non-contradiction. If you don't, and it's called the principle of explosion, that means that when you say that something can be and not be at the same time in the same relationship, and you say that then it's called the principle of explosion, then also whatever you say, the opposite is also true at the same time as well. Everything, and when you do with laws of thought, nothing makes coherence whatsoever, and so you're just making gibberish statements. So whenever you're doing science, you've always got to have rational coherence guiding your empiricism. You have induction, and you go from the many to the one, and then you make application from that one to the many. You categorize it with logic. So induction requires deduction in order to take that information and make something of it. Okay,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
so would you grant me I've never had anybody. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've never had anybody not grant me the law of non-contradiction in our conversation, because if we don't, then
No, I'm happy for you to take that law. It gets a bit weird with quantum mechanics, but as
granted.
far as things we can observe easily, that's true. So
Yeah, and I would say with quantum mechanics that certainly there are things that we don't understand about it, but it's not incoherent. It's just that we don't understand,
it is coherent, but it takes quite a lot of maths, and
and we're not there yet.
is counterintuitive to our Newtonian intuitions. So the idea that a particle could go through two slits at the same time and interfere with itself, that mathematically makes sense in the way of mechanical model, but it doesn't make sense to everyday people who think of things in terms of balls and things like that.
Well, and it only does it when you're watching it.
Yeah.
It's very mysterious. Yes, we don't quite understand it. But okay, so we grant the law of non-contradiction, and then we have, which I'm sure you'll grant me this, is the basic reliability of sense perception. I'm not talking about perfect sense perception, but the only
Yeah,
way we can have
I agree. Sense perception is reliable, so I agree with that.
yeah, generally, yeah. Okay, so with those two premises, then I'd like to go on and say that if something exists, there are only four possibilities. Either it's an illusion, or it's self created, or it's self existent, or it is created by something that is self existent. And only one of those is coherent. And I'd like to go through them if it's okay with you. The first option I have is that if something exists, it is an illusion. Now we know that at least this whole world may be an illusion. You may be an illusion. I may be, just having a dream. This may not be real. But I do know that at least I, the inquirer, exists by way of Descartes' cogito ergo sum. If I'm the one who's doubting, if I'm the one who's asking the question, then it must logically follow that there must be someone doubting. Therefore, I know that I exist. And if nothing else exists in this universe, I know that I must exist. Otherwise, there'd be no inquiry. Would you grant that?
Yep.
Okay, so we know that everything's not an illusion. Okay. So the second option is that which exists is self-created. And this is what some people with the Big Bang Theory posit. I don't think they really think through it too deeply when they say that, but there have been some great minds that have said something so silly as to say the universe exploded into existence at the Big Bang. And that's fundamentally irrational. Something cannot create,
Why is it irrational?
because you've already granted me the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. In order for something to create itself, it had to be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. It had to make itself before it existed. That's not possible.
Okay. Well, in physics, what can happen is you can have the existence of what are called virtual particles.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you have a vacuum is not truly empty.
Right.
Yeah, you have things like electron-positron pairs popping into existence and disappearing a short time later.
Mm-hmm.
The
Now,
electromagnetic
they're
force.
really not popping into existence. Will you grant that's just a colloquial way of saying it, right? It appears to be.
Well, like the electromagnetic force is mediated by virtual photons. So these are photons we can't see, but they can
But
pop.
when you say virtual, they actually do exist.
No, because
Because what are you
no,
talking
but
about if they're not?
they carry electromagnetic forces.
Okay, so they are
But
something.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in the energy formulation says that you can have a small amount of energy exist for a very, very short time, so long as the uncertainty in energy times the uncertainty in time is less than Planck's constant on 2 pi. Okay, so you can have virtual particles, and they're necessary to explain the existence of all the forces, but they actually pop into existence spontaneously.
No, no, they don't. Because you're saying they're virtual, right?
Yeah, they are,
And they carry an energy, right?
strictly, they do.
I'm amazed at
Sorry,
how sloppy people are when they talk about these things. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying the people that you learn from. It's just so obviously simple, and yet somehow they act like they're saying something profound, and it's really nothing profound at all. It's not answering the question at all.
It is actually quite profound. So you can have a virtual photon exist for a very, very short time. It can travel a very short distance,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what actually creates the electromagnetic force.
Okay, but it's something when it creates, right?
Yeah. What I'm saying is, some cosmologists think the universe itself has zero energy, which means that it can exist for an indefinite amount of time, and actually spontaneously come about as what is referred to as a quantum vacuum fluctuation. So Lawrence
That,
said,
that doesn't even begin to answer the question. You're just pushing it back another step.
yeah.
In other
So
words, does a quantum vacuum fluctuation, is that something?
well, it's something that has a measurable effect.
Okay, so it's not spontaneous generation.
Um, what do you mean by spontaneous generation?
It's just another step in the process, which you still need to answer the justification for the quantum vacuum fluctuation. How does that come about? In other words, if something exists necessarily, I mean, if anything exists, something must exist necessarily. This is the whole point of the argument. You cannot have dependent existence. In other words, something that changes exist independently, because it's the law of identity says that it's dependent. And it can't be independent because it is dependent by definition. Everything that changes is affected by something outside of itself, which brings it to the point of actuality that it currently is in. Therefore, it cannot be self-existent. It must be dependent, or contingent is the word in philosophy they use. It's dependent. You can't have dependent or contingent existence existing independently. There must be something in the universe that is self-existent. That's the fourth option that I had there. And anything that changes is not self-existent. Just like when you go outside, you change. The sun will affect you. It will burn your skin if you go outside. You are contingent upon the sun in that particular instance. Therefore, you are not a self-existent being. And my whole point is, how do you just...
People aren't self-existent. We depend on oxygen. We depend on food. We depend on water.
Right.
We depend on the sun.
That's right.
And that's...
And all existence can't be dependent. Do you agree with that?
Well, living things are dependent on certain conditions to be able to survive and reproduce.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Just getting back to your point about the universe. I read A Universe from Nothing by Lawrence M. Krauss.
Yeah, It's child's play. I've
But
seen him give his lecture on it. He's a child. He plays word games. He likes to say a vacuum is nothing. He just equivocates terms. He's a charlatan. He will be utterly forgotten in 50 years, I predict. There's nothing interesting in what he says. Nothing whatsoever. He's just playing games. Would you agree
yeah,
that a
well,
quantum
I'm not
vacuum
into
is something?
well, it's something, but a
So
true
when he
vacuum
says a
would have
universe from nothing and he refers to a quantum vacuum, he's playing games, right?
well, yeah, in that it's just a universe from a quantum vacuum is what he's really talking about.
That's exactly right. He's playing games. And he acting like he's saying something profound, and it's really just childish.
Well, well, I haven't read the book recently, so I read it some time ago. But what I'm saying is, in a quantum vacuum, you
Mhm.
can have things spontaneously come to exist.
You can or can't.
You can.
You can. But is a quantum vacuum something?
Well, it is something, but that something could have been here forever.
Okay. So you agree that that something must be eternal.
Well, according to multiverse theories,
Multiverse is child's play as well. I mean,
yeah,
all it does is push it back another step. It doesn't answer anything.
yeah,
It actually
okay,
compounds the problem eternally.
but our universe need not be the only universe, and it could be we have a cosmos of universes that sort of
Yes.
pop into existence like bubbles, and there's a great big foam of them.
But they don't create themselves before they exist, right?
No, there is something that ultimately is in existence. Call it a quantum vacuum or the laws of physics or something like that. That would be eternal.
Okay, so you agree that there must be two types of ontological status or two types of being in this universe. There must be self-existent being or eternal being, independent being, which is what we are, everything that changes. Because we didn't make ourselves, right?
Well, we evolved from other living things. The evidence is very clear that we have a common ancestor with chimpanzees.
Well, that's what's asserted sillily, I think. uh,
Well, we have 96% of the same
it
DNA.
doesn't matter. That's a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. Just because we have similarity doesn't mean that one gave rise to the other. You're just saying that same things are similar. Similarity does not mean prove origin. It's just something that is postulated as a possibility.
Well, the law sort of recognizes similarity. So you know, if a father has to pay child support to his ex-wife and gets a DNA test that proves that the child is biologically not his,
Yes, but we've
that's
proven that humans can give rise to other humans, right?
yeah, but
Okay, so that's a little different.
well,
I'm not opposed to Darwinian synthesis on a small level. Of course, that's science. We've empirically verified that.
yeah, but there are intermediate fossils of things that are halfway between a human and a chimpanzee,
Well, anyway,
such as
yeah, I don't. I'd rather get off. I'd rather not get on that one. I want to talk about the whole concept of being a common descent is not my passion really, as much as it is the idea that the universe cannot be all that there is if it's all dependent, if it's all changing. Pure change cannot be is not anything. There were two pre-Socratic philosophers, Heraclitus and Parmenides, who had this big battle. Heraclitus said everything's changing, nothing is the same. Parmenides says no, if something is pure change, then it's really nothing because it's nothing. There's no consistency to its being. And to this day, I have not heard a satisfactory um, remedy to that conundrum myself. I know that Plato had one and Aristotle had one, and I mean I'm a Christian, so I still can't understand the mechanism of it though because I think Aristotle failed, and Thomas Aquinas was Aristotelian and he tried to implement it with Christianity, and I don't think it works. But we do know that everything is not purely changed. You are changing, but there's also a consistency to you. Would you agree with that? Even though your entire body is going through cell change, throughout your
Yeah.
life. You're not even the same matter that you were, in an overall sense, but you're still Sean, and you
Yeah.
still have a consistency. So that's a great question of Western philosophy: is how do we account for the change and being? How can we have these things? And we know that the universe can't be made of pure change, again, because it would need to create itself before it existed. And that's manifest nonsense. Ex nihilo nihil fit. Have you ever heard of that Latin phrase?
So sorry, I'm not haven't read ancient philosophy. I'm not interested in it.
Okay, but but
And
but but just because you're not interested in it doesn't mean it's not important. That's the thing. If you can't, Sean, for this whole conversation, you've given me all kinds of empirical data, but you've given me very little by way of rational understanding of how the one and the many work together, or how that we can have coherence in this universe and have ontological justification for where we're at. In other words, you can tell me the what, but you can't tell me the why, and yet you act as if your life is very important. Would you agree with that?
yeah, well, there might not be a why, and any meaning is meaning people have to create.
Well, then why do you act like there is?
What do I act like? What?
That your life matters?
Because it does to me and to the
Yes.
people I love
Is it
and
a
the people who
fantasy or
love
is it
me.
true?
Sorry?
Is it a fantasy that it matters, or is it really true?
No, it's really true.
Okay, so it's objectively true that human beings are valuable.
Yes, they are.
I'm sorry?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so there must be someone outside of us that gives us that value, because you don't make up value for everybody else. You don't make up for example, the 2 plus 2 is 4. You recognize that as truth, but it's not something that you create. It's something that exists outside of you. And now you're saying that value, which is something only personhood can do, is something that's outside of you that is imposed upon you from outside.
No, people have value. People would be very upset if I was to die.
That's right. I would most certainly. And so I think that from my perspective, you are intrinsically valuable because that's the way you were made. You think life is valuable because you have been determined to do that. But how can you be determined to do something unintentionally? You say that the
Well,
universe is unintentional, but yet you are an intender. How did that happen? How did unintentionality intend your intention?
people do things with intention. So do animals.
Yeah, you're just giving me a just so story. You're saying we're already that way. I'm saying, how did it come to be? How did unintentional? Let's imagine the entire universe is unintentional. Okay, it's just one big circle.
Yeah.
It's unintentional. All right, and then all of a sudden, intentionality instantiates in Shanduli. Okay, how did unintentionality intend your intention when the law of identity says it's unintentional? Unintentionality cannot intend by definition. Again, this is why I say the laws of thought are so important in our inquiry. You can't have unintentionality intending intention, and yet intention exists today. There must be something eternally intentional. In other words, otherwise there would be nothing intentional. There would be no value, because value is intention.
Okay. So does a cat act with intention?
Yes.
Does a bacterium?
It seems that they are programmed for intention toward life.
Yeah.
Or toward survival.
Towards survival, right? And things that don't have an intention towards survival don't survive and don't reproduce.
Well, they don't successfully, because I think there are many things that have an intention and it fails, and then they.
So for instance, if you had a mutation in people that made them suicidal before they have kids, that would be bred out of the population.
Right. Natural selection.
Yeah, by natural selection.
Mm-hmm.
And and so for instance, cats that can't figure out how to hunt will starve to death.
Right.
So for instance, feral cats are a big problem in Australia, and they're all big. They're bigger than normal cats, and they're all tabby, so they're camouflaged. Okay, so a pure white cat, and they survive.
Yeah.
And they're very, very successful, and they kill a lot of native wildlife.
Are you guys allowed to shoot them?
Yep.
Oh, good. That'd be kind of fun.
Um,
Tabby feral cat
I'm
hunting.
not sure the exact laws, but certainly feral cats, feral dogs, and and so on are allowed to be shot. People are allowed to hunt deer because there's feral deer as well. And
Feral deer?
lice in Australia, yeah.
Huh.
Or
Interesting.
well, Europeans introduced a lot of animals to Australia, and
Uh-huh.
feral rabbits could be shot. They deliberately just released something called Khaleesi virus, which kills rabbits
Huh.
because because they're not native to Australia, and
Huh.
rabbits are a huge pest.
Uh-huh. Oh, you have
They
big
got
rabbits,
they
don't
were
you?
sorry.
I mean, do you have like those rabbits that are like those? Did you say you had feral rabbits?
Feral rabbits, feral foxes. Well, foxes are wild animals, but they were introduced by Europeans to control the rabbits, and they uh, kill a lot of native wildlife as well.
Interesting. Huh.
So,
And they're really big.
so what are really big?
Huh. That's cool. I
Uh,
forgot what we're
there's
talking
a
about.
lot of feral animals. It is actually possible to get guns in Australia, just not AR-15s.
Hmm. Yeah, I think still a lot of people have guns, don't they?
Well, I don't, I've never been interested in owning a gun, but you need a license. You need a very strict background check. And you're limited in the types of guns you can own. So you're not allowed to have semi-automatic rifles and things like
Hmm.
that. But
Hmm.
certainly, weapons for hunting you're allowed to have. You're not allowed to have handguns.
Anyway, we digress. All right, so I completely forgot what we were talking about. Um,
You're talking about intentions
oh,
and
intentionality. Yeah,
intentionality.
so
Intentionality is a product of natural selection.
okay, but how did I'm not interested in how it grew. I'm saying how it got here to begin with. That's the question. Just like your own existence, it's the same question. Thomas Aquinas had one. It's called his fourth way. Anytime everything is by way of degree. If you see something instantiate here in this earth, there must be a perfection of such a thing that gives it its being. It's known in ancient scholasticism as realism or Platonic realism. And something cannot arise from its opposite. Unintentionality cannot give rise to intentionality by definition. So if you're intentional, there must be something eternally intentional, which must be personal, because intentionality is something that is. Would you agree that intentionality is something that's a function of personhood?
Yeah, people have intentions and people make plans and
Persons
uh,
do.
people do. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal creature. Like rocks don't create philosophical societies, right?
No.
Yeah. So it's those types of things that are intentional. So if we have an intentionality instantiating in this universe, say, let's say in humans, most obviously, as we're having this conversation, there must be something somewhere that has intentionality that is eternal, that is not dependent. Otherwise, intentionality could not instantiate.
Um, well, I disagree with that because um, you we have intentionality, but as we pointed out, even bacteria have intentionality, and we can account for that by natural selection. So basically, that life originated from some molecules of RNA or whatever that could replicate themselves,
Hmm.
and the ones that were better at replicating are the ones that survived. And as changes happened, mutations happened, those replicators that were better able to survive
Hmm.
um, succeeded, and all life is genetically related. Like humans have 40% of their DNA in common with a banana
Right.
plant, and the reason for that is all the biochemistry is the same, the genetic codes are the same for
Hmm.
all living things, and that could be explained by common descent.
Okay. So, but the whole point is that you agree that Darwin never tried to assert evolution as applying to cosmogony or to beginnings. He was simply a process after intentionality, as it were, already was in existence. It's just a process, okay? It doesn't. So
Does
when
a
you
plant
so when you peel the natural selection, you're just giving me a just so story. You're not really answering the question.
does a plant have intentionality?
I'm sorry. Does a what?
Does a plant?
A plant has chemical processes toward which it is moving. There's a struggle like Darwin's, on the origin of species, or the preservation of the favored races in the struggle for life. You see intentionality even in the subtitle of his book, even though he said there's no really any. He might have said that there's immediate purpose, but there's no ultimate purpose. It's the struggle. I'm sorry, the preservation of favored races. All right, the favored races are the ones that win in the struggle. We're struggling to win. We're struggling to make it in this life, and yet there's no purpose in this thing. There's no. Aristotle had a fourfold causality that he said that if you look at causality, you've got your material cause is the thing out of which something is made. You've got the efficient cause, which is the thing that brings something about. Let me explain it in a way of a sculptor and a sculpture. Okay, the material cause would be the block of granite out of which the sculpture is going to make the sculpture. Okay. The efficient cause would be the sculptor himself, who is chipping away at the stone to make the final whatever it is. The formal cause would be the instructions by which he is relating, whether it's in his mind or on paper. He knows what he wants to do, and that's the form. The form is the thing that guides him to make the thing itself. And then you had the final causality, which would be the reason for which he's making it. Let's say he's making it because the king commissioned him to make a statue or something like that. And in that fourfold causality, you've got something toward a goal. And what happened is during the Enlightenment, there's a man named Immanuel Kant who wrote a book called Critique of Pure Reason. And he basically said that there are certain things that we cannot know. And he said that we cannot know, he said we can't know God. We can't know the self or the soul because we can't experience it with our senses. And then we can't experience the essence of things. In other words, you look at a tomato and you look at it under a microscope, and the more and more and more we get, we break it down and we get to the atomic level, then you get to the subatomic level, and we still can't see the essence of what a tomato is. Okay, so even today, we know that Kant was right on that we cannot experience it directly. So he said those three things, the soul, the God, and the essence of things, he relegated those to what's called the noumenal realm. And what happened is he says, we can't know those, so let's stop thinking about those things. Let's only think about things we can experience with the senses. And so the whole idea of metaphysics, the thing that which is above physics, is off the table. You're not supposed to think about that. And many theologians and many philosophers fell dead at Kant's feet and basically said that's what we're going to do in Enlightenment. And so what it does is it doesn't give us the ability to think about things toward purpose or goals. So whenever I'm sure you know, with the evolutionary theory, you cannot think of formal and final cause. You're not allowed to think about things going toward a certain direction. Nothing's going toward a certain direction. And
No,
you can't.
every living thing is doing is adapting to its current environment. And if things had worked out differently, we wouldn't be here. So, for instance, if the KT event, which wiped out the dinosaurs, didn't happen, mammals would have stayed small animals living in trees and running around at night, and apes could never have evolved if dinosaurs were still around. So evolution doesn't have goals. Humans aren't
Right.
the goal of evolution.
And so that's what happened in the Enlightenment. We lost the whole idea of causality, and what we're left with is the material cause of everything, and that would be like the granite block itself, or the table. It's like you're saying, you take the table, and somebody, a person makes a table toward the goal of being able to have something on which to eat, and so we're not allowed to ask those questions anymore. We're purely materialistic, and so we have no justification, no rational justification for saying there's such a thing as, say, for example, human rights. Human rights is a fantasy, just as I was alluding to earlier. There's no such thing as human rights. That's just something that
they're a good way of ensuring governments act in ways that are beneficial to the people.
Right,
So,
but the people don't matter.
Well, I think they do.
Yeah, I know. You're programmed to your whole heart, if you will, screams at the idea that that life does not exist. But your mind, because you've been indoctrinated with enlightenment thought, says that no, really, I'm just using it as a crutch to help me get through life. But it's really not true that life matters. But you can't get away from it because you've been programmed to value life, and it's something that you struggle with. But you can't give. I've never met an atheist yet that can give me a justification for moral code. In 10 years, I've been arguing. Not once have I had a serious atheist who could say, how do you come up with a moral code that says that existence matters? Every moral code focuses on the sanctity of existence, that existence is special. Every law that we make, everything is centered around how can we promote life? How can we care for those who are suffering? And yet, the atheist perspective is utterly irrational. And this is my assertion that any worldview that is based in irrational conjecture is doomed to failure. And that's where we're at today. Have you noticed with the rise of atheism that the entire Western culture is unraveling before our eyes?
Well, I would say that it wasn't. It depends on what you mean. So, for instance, the rise of atheism would give a lot more credence to liberal ideas, to the ideas that it's okay for people to be homosexual if they want to be. It's okay for people to be transgender. And I think we're actually a more compassionate society, certainly in Australia, than we were in the past. For instance, if we consider attitudes towards hitting children, generally in Australia, we regard that as morally wrong and we don't do it. But it used to be that people would just hit children with sticks and so forth. We have attitudes that are much more against violence. So for instance, I'm a teacher, and if there's a fight in the playground, we take that very seriously. We'll contact the parents. We'll probably suspend whoever instigated it. We'll take that very seriously. Whereas it used to be that if there's a fight in the yard, the schools wouldn't take it seriously. It's just boys being boys. So I think, yeah.
Sean, would you say though that the Western culture is it a place of vivacity and strength and growth, or would you say that we are struggling? The entire European Union has fallen apart before our eyes. America I've never seen it like this in my entire life. And my assertion is that there's no matrix for unifying diversity. The greatest question of Western thought has always been, again, the big question was, how do you have being and change? How do you justify those? But also the great question is, how do you make unity out of diversity? That's been a great, and people don't even understand this anymore.
So are you meaning diversity in races or what?
No, anything. How do things cohere together? How do they come together? How do you justify the fact that for the United States, our motto is E pluribus unum? Do you know what that means?
Yeah, out of many become one.
Right. And the people who founded our country were very astute philosophically, and they said, yes, this is our goal. Today, everybody glorifies in diversity. Do you know what diversity is without unity? It's called it's disintegration. And that's what we're experiencing. There's no matrix for unifying people under the same goals and banners. Everything is about the individual and my rights, and there's no big picture meta-narrative to unify us together. Atheism always, 100% of the time, leads to disintegration because there's no meta-narrative. There's no rational, coherent view for saying, my life matters. And that's where we're at right now. As skepticism rises, disintegration necessarily follows, and that's where we're at right now. You may not like religion, but it has been the cohering in Western culture, the cohering principle of formal principles, like the instructions. Remember, I talked about the instructions when the guy's making the statue. It's been the instruct. That's why Greek mythology was so important to the Greek and Roman cultures, because it provided a matrix to unify that diversity. That's why Socrates was killed, because he was messing with their system, and he made him drink the hemlock. But he was trying to get people to think for themselves. He was questioning the gods. And I'm not saying mythology is somehow good, but because it wasn't true. But I am saying that it was useful in cohering society. That's why it was so important. And they understood the importance of unity out of diversity. And that's what that provided.
Well, Australia is probably a less religious culture than the United States. On the last census, 30% of people said they had no religion, which is the biggest
The UK is
category.
even more. Now, would it be fair to say that Australia has a history of Christian faith?
Yes, it has.
Okay, so you're
But
just running off the fumes. That's all. People are they still hold to the cultural norms that were before, but they're disintegrating. Just like in Europe, they're ahead of you. We're behind you because we still have about 47%, I think, people that go to church. So, but you look, I think it's 2% of the people in Western Europe, maybe it's in the UK. I think it's the UK. They actually go to church regularly, and that entire culture is falling apart. I think that Scotland's going to come up with a resolution to try to break away. They've broken out of the European Union. You're seeing the entire Western culture fall apart before our eyes, and it's directly related to skepticism because there's no matrix to unify diversity. That's my opinion.
okay, have you actually read Humanist Manifesto 3?
No, I have not.
I suggest that you do, because humanism is the idea that human life and having a good life and working towards the betterment of humanity is our goal.
Yeah.
And we have ethics that guide us in our behavior. So,
yes,
for
but
instance,
there's no reason for it, Sean. That's why secular humanism, let me say this, and I'm not trying to attack you if you're secular humanist. Secular humanism is the stupidest worldview on the planet because it says that life is very, very valuable, but then they say there's no reason for saying that life is valuable. It is the dumbest of all views. It's idiotic. It's stupid. You've got to have some brains behind why you're saying what you're saying. You've got to be rational in the way that you say things. And secular humanism has none. It's so funny to me that people, it's so dumb.
Oh, well, if you haven't read the manifesto, I don't think you can justify that.
Because I know what secular humanism teaches. It has no functional meta-narrative. Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay, what is a meta-narrative then?
Well, human beings exist. There's probably no God. There's no afterlife, and we should aim to create a happy life in this life. And to do so requires us to follow moral rules.
Okay, so how do you justify the value of human existence, human rights? What rational view do you have for that?
I value my life, and other people value their lives.
So there is no you. You just have this emotion, but not a reason, right?
Now, well, the thing is, when you talk about ethical statements, there is emotion involved.
Well, that's all you have. That's all you have. You have this emotion that you feel like life exists, life matters, but you don't have a reason for it. Now, I've been doing this 10 years, again, Sean, more than that, and I haven't found one person that can answer that question. No, because it's not there. You think life really exists. You have this really strong emotion. You can't push it away. You've got to say it's there. But when I say, does it really true? Is it really matter? And you say, well, yeah, it matters to me. That's the best question I've had. That's not a reason. That's an emotion. That's emoting. That's a crutch to help you make it through life. But that's not a reason to say that others should value existence just because you have that feeling. But everybody has that written on their heart. If somebody doesn't have it, we say that they have a pathology. They are sick. We put them in jail or we put them in a hospital or something like that. We put them away so they won't hurt other people because instinctively we know that life exists. But humanism cannot give you a reason for that. We've got to be reasonable with our lives.
Well, if you haven't read the manifesto, I don't think you can.
But I know what humanism teaches, and you just explicated it for me in a way that basically said exactly what I said. You can't give me a reason for that. What is in the Humanist Manifesto, the third Human Manifesto? What is the justification for the valuing your neighbor? Is it just some stupid emotion you have, or is it a mind, a logical?
Well, it is logical, because if we lived in a society where people did not treat each other with respect, it'd be a pretty miserable place to be.
But that's not a reason. That's just to say I want to have a happy life, and I got to treat you like you really are valuable. But objectively speaking, from my perspective, you are nothing but stardust.
Yeah.
You are nothing valuable.
Well, the actual cash value of the elements that make up a human being is less than $50.
There you go. That's my whole point. See, you make my
Um,
point for me, my friend. Okay. Well, listen, I need to get going. I got to do some other stuff, my friend.
yeah, no
Um,
worries.
and I really like having conversations with people that are kind and thoughtful because sometimes people just like to argue, and I hope I'm not. So I'm really passionate about things I believe, and to me, it's just I've been interacting with. So I hope I don't think I've been being rude or anything like that. But it's like, it just seems so obvious to me. But you've been very kind and very thoughtful in your interaction, and obviously you're a lot more intelligent than me. But I think we have differences in the things that the different knowledges that we know. But you're very gracious and charitable, and I really appreciate you're willing to have this conversation with me.
Yeah, I like the fact that you weren't quoting Bible verses and threatening me with hell, because a lot of Christians are like that.
Well, again, I think that Christianity has fallen on hard times because we have fallen in the same trap that philosophy has fallen into. When Immanuel Kant said metaphysics are off the table, which is really just the intellectual study of God, in my view, the people said, "Oh, that's okay. Just give us our Bibles, and we'll retreat to our Bibles, and we'll just do that." And what it's done is it's dumbed down Christianity, and I think it's dumbed down philosophy, and I think it's led us down a path. In my opinion, we're like a bird flying with one wing since the Enlightenment for the last couple 250 years or so, and I'm seeing it. There's a resurgence. People are returning to some old thought. The Renaissance was ad fontes, go back to the sources. They had a Renaissance of returning back to previous thinking and learning from them. And we're having that happen even now, I think, in both theology and in philosophy. And hopefully, and I even see my atheist scientific friends are getting an interest in philosophy, which is encouraging to me. I used to be in a debate community called the Great Debate Community and Google Plus when it was around. I don't know if you know
Do
Google
you know
Plus is.
Steve McRae?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Ask him. He knows who I am. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So yeah, I follow him on Twitter. So,
Okay, yeah. Tell him
um,
Trey says
but
hi.
okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we can talk again sometime if you like, and it's very nice to meet you. And I'm sure we'll see each other as we chit chat online.
Yep, no worries. Nice
Okay.
meeting you. Bye
All right.
bye.
Nice meeting you, Sean. Have a good one.